Columbus, Georgia, this is your City Council. Mayor Teresa Tomlinson. City Manager Isaiah Hughley. Pop Barnes, District 1. Glenn Davis, District 2. Bruce Huff, District 3. Evelyn Turner Pugh, Mayor Pro Tem and District 4. Mike Baker, District 5. Gary Allen, District 6. Mimi Woodson, District 7. Tom Buck, District 8. Judy Thomas, Post 9 at-large counselor. Skip Henderson, Post 10 at-large counselor. Tiny Washington, Clerk of Council. And City Attorney Clifton Fay. Columbus, Georgia, this is your City Council.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the August 11th meeting of the Columbus City Council. We're so glad to have you here today. We don't yet have a quorum, but we're going to go ahead and do non-official business. We have several items. It's going to be a long meeting. And so what we'd like to do is go ahead and jump in and get started, and then as soon as we get a quorum, we'll move on to the official business. Mr. City Attorney, if we don't have a quorum by the time we get to the minutes, if you'd make a note to pull those to your agenda. And with that, we are going to call forward Pastor Corey Neal, who's with Greater Peace Baptist Church here in Columbus, and he's going to get us started with an invocation consistent with his faith tradition. Thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you. Good morning to all. Let us pray. God, we thank you for this day and this time. We thank you for our laying down last night to sleep and our early rising this morning. God, we thank you for this great city, this great mayor, this wonderful council, God, and all of our city leadership. God, we thank you that this city has been blessed, and we ask for continued blessing upon this city. God, we ask now that you order the steps of our mayor and our council according to your will, your word, and your way, God. Continue to allow this great city to be blessed, Father, in a prosperous way, Father, in a peaceful way. And we thank you in advance for what shall transpire in this business meeting on today. And God, we ask now that you bless like only you can bless, touch like only you can touch. And when you do it, we'll be so sure to give you the glory, the honor, and the praise. In the mighty and matchless name of Jesus the Christ, we now pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so very much. And again, that's Reverend Corey Neal with Greater Peace Baptist Church across from the Llewellyn Center. They got it going on over there. So thank you so very much for all that you do. We usually have helpers. Our helpers must be with our counselors. But we're going to muddle through the Pledge of Allegiance ourselves. So if you guys could stand up and join me in a pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Well, as I said, we're going to move the minutes to the city attorney's agenda, and I think we're going to go ahead and have the city manager pull forward one of his updates. He has several on his agenda, and so we'll start with perhaps the shortest one, Mr. City Manager, and get a little information before we jump to business.
Madam Mayor and Council, I'm going to bring forward the Columbus High School parking matter that we discussed maybe a couple of meetings back. We had a representative from the neighborhood, as you know, to come and make a presentation expressing concern for neighbors in and around Columbus High School for students who are not provided transportation by the school district because they all come to that magnet, and so they are parking around the neighborhood, and there are some neighborhood concerns. And so you directed me to meet with the superintendent, and didn't get to meet with him until last week. And so Director of Engineering, Donna Newman, is going to give you an update on our discussion and where we are at this time. And so with that, our Engineering Director, Donna Newman.
Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
As the city manager was mentioning, we did meet with Dr. Lewis last week. Just to bring you up to date, does this work? There we go. I'm sorry. On June 17th, the homeowners representative, the one that came to council, members of the engineering department, and at least 3 members of the Muskogee County School District and the Columbus Police Department met to discuss the parking issue, the ongoing parking issue around Columbus High School. This is not new. This is something that's been going on for years, and council has enacted several parking restrictions on the residential area streets and that around the high school over the years to assist with this problem. On July 14th is when Brian Lackey, who happens to work in the Department of Engineering, attended and was on the public agenda and brought forth the concern from the neighborhoods. And he represented several different homeowners associations. It was not just one, it was multiple in that area. And then on August 4th, the city manager and city staff met with Dr. Lewis and discussed it. At that time, Dr. Lewis did not have a plan of action for the parking. He did say that he was going to go back and talk with his staff to see if they had come up with any solutions or recommendations from the time of the original meeting back in June. This is the existing conditions. You will notice the areas outlined in red are no parking anytime restricted areas. The green area is 2-hour parking from 9 till 6. The blue, it's kind of hard to see, is 2-hour parking from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. on weekdays. And the black is the 2-hour parking from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. on weekdays. And then the purple is just areas that it was observed that students were parking. It was noted in one of our meetings that it increases as the school year goes on. It's not as bad when school first starts because you have a class coming in that have not yet obtained their driver's license. But as the school year goes on, that's a whole class just about that gets their driver's license. So by the end of school, it becomes a more complex problem for the residents. This is just existing conditions, and you can see they squeeze in every spot they can get in on the streets. And we came up with a parking management plan. It's very similar to what has been enacted downtown in the uptown area where you have a mix of commercial, business, and residential. And what we propose to do would be to limit the parking around and in the park. Many of the students do park in the park and along Cherokee and 18th to limit that to 4 hours so that there's a turnover for the residents that would like to use the park. We would also like to establish a residential parking area in a designated area, and I'll show you the map of that proposed area in just a second. And what this would do, what we're proposing is to get the residents to get 2 free annual permits, and this is what we're looking at, some kind of sticker for their car so that it can be easily seen from a enforcement officer. And then they also may be able to get a hanger that they would be able to hang. And then also give them the opportunity to purchase additional parking permits in that area. Some of them, I know some of the ladies may have bridge parties or other type meetings. You have the lawn maintenance service. They may have frequent visitors. And so we would like to give them the opportunity to purchase additional permits for those type uses and at a cost of $25 per vehicle. This would require us to extend the enforcement area for Metro. They are enforcing in the same general area, but we would have to include this area as well. Parking in the area would be permitted only from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday, and then on the weekends and in the evenings there's no restrictions. This is what we're proposing right now, and the way that we came up with this was looked at the areas that we already had existing restrictions, and then we also looked at areas where there was known parking. And so we just went a little bit beyond that. We were trying to limit it as much as we could because it will be an inconvenience for some of the residents, especially those that may have rental property. And this is kind of our timeline right now. We would like to provide council a draft ordinance in their package on the 25th. We would have the first reading of the ordinance on September 8th, second reading of the ordinance on September 22nd. And we have an effective date of January 1, and the reason we came up with that is we think a minimum after the ordinance becomes law, we've got to have the signs manufactured and installed. We'll have to have permits printed. We have to do notifications to the students as well as the neighbors. And then we will also have to have time for the neighbors to purchase their permits that are required or obtain their 2 free permits. And one thing that we want to do as well, as you know, yesterday was the first day of school, is we want to kind of go out a couple of different times during this time frame and make sure that the area looks right, that we're not extending it further than we need to at this point in time.
So, Director Newman, if you would go back to the slide where there's already no parking, I think it was one of the earlier slides. If you would go back, but let me just say in my meeting with Dr. Lewis, of course, that was his introduction to this as a problem, and this was just last week, and obviously, because it was an initial meeting for him, he did not have any options for us to consider. And I shared with him what I thought could be possible options for the school district. But if we don't have an option or get an option from them as we move forward, then we would have no other choice but to move forward with an option from the city. And I'd had a previous meeting with city staff to look at all of the options, and this option that's being presented today is the option that we came down to. But the options that I thought would be available to the school district, obviously one would be to offer those 538 or so magnet students coming to Columbus High School transportation who are currently not being provided transportation. And so there are 538 students, as was stated by the resident presenting before you a couple of weeks ago, 538 students coming to the magnet program, not provided transportation by the Muskogee County School District, which would mean that either their parents are dropping them off or they are driving to school. And they only have 235 parking spaces on the campus for students. And so one option would be to offer them bus transportation. And, of course, that would be an expense to them, obviously, and I can't speak to them for that because they need more buses or more drivers. Another option would be, my thought to Dr. Lewis was to do a park and ride, identify a site where these students could drive near Columbus High School and then a shuttle service to the school from that park and ride site. Of course, there would be an expense to that with buses and drivers. And then the third option that I share would be a thought would be where you have the 235 parking spaces, you could do a parking structure. Well, there is a cost to that, and it may not be accepted by residents. And, of course, all of those come with a fiscal note and may or may not be doable by the school district. But those were the thoughts that I could share with him as what could be options. And I asked him if he would take some time and go back and talk with his staff and try and identify an option or options. But if they can't come up with an option other than what the neighborhood representative said the last time in those initial meetings, they were being told by persons from the school district that that's an enforcement issue. That puts it on us and the city, and if we don't have no parking areas over there and it's just a residential street, well, anyone can go over there and park, and we can't enforce it. And then I got to thinking back to former Councilor Red McDaniel. He kept bringing these ordinances that would restrict parking from this corner and so many feet to this corner, but he never said what, I can't recall that he ever said what the problem was. He was just fixing the problem in a silent way. And I thought back, and I'm like, okay, he was fixing this problem. But he never really said it. He just keep bringing these ordinances that got us all of these no parking zones on these streets. And so he had already started the process to fix the problem. He just didn't make a big deal out of it. He just brought an ordinance. And so we're at that point now that rather than continue to put no parking on these streets in and around Columbus High School, the thought is to do what we have done in parts of Uptown, offer residents parking permits or decals and these hangers that when they have guests or visitors, they can park on the street, and they've got a hanger, and if Metro enforcement comes through there and they've got a hanger, they know that they're invited guests by someone who lives in the neighborhood. And so we're at this option if the Muskogee County School District fails to come forward with an option that can be agreeable with you, acceptable by the residents, and all walk away happy. And so that's why we're here today with this. And that's the timeline for getting it done if we don't get an option from the Muskogee County School District. And so with that, we'll answer any
we
questions
do
that you
have several counselors in queue, and I did want to pass on to council that I did receive an email from the chairman, Rob Varner. Even though it looks like there had been discussions between our staff and school district staff for months, if not years, for whatever reason, this had never percolated its way up to decision makers. So this was the first that Superintendent Dr. Lewis had heard of this, and the first that Rob Varner had heard of this, and they asked for time to consider some sort of solution that maybe ample time is given with the timeline that has been presented. But I just wanted you all to know that they have asked to have some time. So however you weigh these competing interests. And with that, we'll go to Councilor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of questions. Do we know if the parking places, the 200 and whatever they are that are existing, are they assigned to students?
No, I think it's first come, first serve. It's 235 spaces, first come, first serve.
I think there's some reserved for faculty, and then the students parking what's left over.
Okay. Well, that's the way it was when I was there 100 years ago. But I was just wondering if parking on Cherokee, when I was there, we parked on both sides of Cherokee. I know we've restricted one side. Is it an option to maybe consider opening up the side that's now currently no parking, just in front of Columbus High, not all the way down Cherokee?
We can consider that, but I think the reason it was probably changed was the safety issue of the students coming out between cars and then getting in and out of cars. And of course, you're going to narrow that street if you put parking on both sides as far as the traveling public. And I think that was part of the issue that it came forward before, was concerns with safety of the students in the cars and walking across, jumping out in front of a car, maybe not being able to see, or the car being able to see the student coming out between the car. We did put in the improved crosswalks right there. They do have two options now that weren't there before. So it is something that could be considered, but we may have to look at it.
Well, the other thing I was going to add to that is we could consider adding speed tables in front of Columbus High to slow everything so that when students are going in between cars, going to school, coming from school, it would be a more safe environment. But I do not recall my tenure there or any time since somebody having an accident in that regard, parking on both sides of the street. I don't remember. It could have happened, but I just don't remember anything standing out.
Well,
I know we had, doesn't pertain to this parking issue, but a few years ago we had a couple of issues where students ran off Cherokee, ran into the ditch there. And we talked about guardrails, we talked about preventative issues, and since we raised the issue and we talked about it, I don't think anybody else, student-wise, has had any accidents in the ditch. But there comes a point where once we alert and talk about it, and I'm sure the school system will be able to alert the students at Columbus High. There's a lot of things we can talk about, a lot of things they can talk about to bring attention, shine light on students parking there. But at some point, it just seems like it's the thing we should consider is maybe revisiting the Cherokee.
That would just offer just a few more parking spaces. It wouldn't give you a lot of parking spaces.
But certainly, we
It
will
would
do
help.
that. We will take a look at the parking along the other side of Cherokee, and I mean, if there's an opportunity to create 20 more spaces, certainly we'll do, with safety first, we'll certainly do that. So we'll take a look at it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have the Mayor Pro Tem. Wait, hold on a second here. And by the way, just so you all know, we are down from our major system, so we're having to use the auxiliary system. Go ahead.
Good morning. Have we or will we consider also in the areas where we're getting the complaints about the parking in front of the driveways and stuff like that, maybe we can just have parking on one side of the street in those areas where the complaints are coming in? You know, I've been in Columbus 65 years. Columbus High School has been in Columbus much longer than I have. They've had a parking problem for 27 years I've been down here on the city council. In the 27 years after I leave, they're going to have a parking problem.
Yes, ma'am.
And I think it's unrealistic for us to even think that they would build a parking structure over in that area. I just don't see that. This council wouldn't do it, and I don't think the school system would do it. And I just think we just need to get together with the homeowners, the school system, now, and you all, and try to work something out that's favorable to everybody. Everybody's not going to be pleased. You're going to still have some unhappy people. But Columbus High School is not the only high school that has the parking problem. I get calls about the Kendrick High School area. And the kids have to go to school. So, you know, I just think that that might help some to just park on one side of the street, talk to the children, to let them know that they cannot block somebody's driveway, because I think that's one of the biggest problems.
That is one of the concerns, yes, ma'am, and we can consider that.
Okay.
And now, Councilor Thomas.
I have a couple of questions, too. On the parking permit that you talked about, the $25 charge, Mr. City Manager, you said that we have a similar program in Uptown, in the Historic District. Do they pay for additional?
I think they actually pay for their initial
I'm going to
permits.
let Deputy City Manager Goodwin,
Okay.
she handles that. so.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Right now, with that program, they pay an annual fee. They're able to get up to
Tell me what they pay for.
They pay $25 per year for up to 2 parking passes. And these are the parking passes or the parking permits that they currently receive in the Uptown area. That allows them to park within 2 blocks of their residence, anywhere within 2 blocks. So they're not able to, you know, if you're on Front Avenue, go to
Right.
3rd and just park wherever you want to park without fear of violation. But it does give them the opportunity to park within 2 blocks, and it's $25 annually.
But
And
it-
what about the guest parking?
We don't currently
Well-
have, we don't currently have
well-
anything for guest parking.
And let me just say that isn't the resident receive that because, let's say, on a particular street, there's a 2-hour parking limit.
That's right.
This allows them to ignore the
Right, for
The
any of the
parking
timed violations.
the time, and so that's why a guest can still come and park during those certain hours, but if there's a 2-hour limit and they're there 2 hours and 15 minutes, they're going to get a ticket.
Right.
With that permit, that resident can just,
Okay. And we are we are looking at around Columbus High School, a 2 permits without charging?
Yes, ma'am. That's, the first 2 would be without charge, and then the additional would have a charge.
Okay.
And that's something we need to discuss further.
I've
We
got
just,
some real concerns
yeah.
about that, that it ought to be
Yeah.
uniform. If we charge the folks in the historic district, we probably ought to charge the folks around Columbus High School, or not charge either one. Whatever we do, we ought to be consistent.
and I don't disagree with that. And in fact, I hope we don't have to bring the ordinance. I hope they have options that they figure out, but if not, we need to tweak, and that's why we would bring it on the 25th and have more discussion about it, about what an ordinance would look like.
And I, Mr. City Manager, I remember when I got my driver's license, and I'm not going to drive to any park and ride place and park my car. I'm going to drive my car to school.
I agree.
want everybody to see me in my car. And I'm going to drive my car to school. And it's because I have extracurricular activities after school that I need to get home from. So, all of those kinds of concerns are there. So,
I was the same way.
and if you look at the map that you had of where parking is currently allowed, can you go back to that one?
Oh, it's right there.
That one.
Yes, ma'am.
On Cherokee, between 17th Street and 13th Street, along Lake Bottom there, the kids don't park there. Those parking places are typically open. I go down to Lake Bottom quite often, and they don't park there during school. They park between Girard and 17th at Lake Bottom. But they don't, many of them do not park on the other way. Let me ask you this. For example, on 17th there, what is this, the circle there that goes from 17th to Cherokee?
Flournoy?
Flournoy. Would those folks would have to have a parking permit?
Yes, ma'am.
Everybody around Columbus High would have to have a parking permit.
Well, we
and
have
let me just say,
boundary,
this to be clear, that most residents, I think, in that area have garages or driveways, and they don't park their vehicles on the street. The permit would be that if there are going to be vehicles parked on the street, they may have guests or coming by, and so that would be the only reason. Otherwise, they're going to park in their driveway or in their garage, and no permit is necessary or required. And what staff, as Director Newman said earlier, they're going to take these first few weeks of school, week or two, and they're going to go out and survey the area to see actually where people are parking. Where are they parking? Because we don't want to go into an area and put restrictions where they don't park. So we're going to be surveying over the next week or so.
Okay, thank you.
I do want to also clarify, now, we don't have this program in the historic district. It's only in Uptown. We don't have the permitting program in Uptown, in historic district, only Uptown.
So what is the difference?
Well, the historic district, we don't enforce the historic district.
Historic
It's
district would be
residential.
south of 9th.
Right, and we don't go that
Street.
far.
And so where is this?
This is just in the Uptown area
Around
between 9th and 14th and 3rd and Bay. That's
Not
the
many
area that we
houses
cover.
there.
No, this is strictly, no.
Lofts. There are
Pretty much
lofts
commercial.
there, like flowers, loft.
But we have the
apartments.
lofts. We have all the
Lofts.
lofts. Yes,
Got it.
the lofts.
Okay.
Okay. All right, Mayor Pro Tem.
Mr. City Manager, I understand you plan on possibly bringing this back August 20?
No, just for discussion, if we'd have a sample ordinance that you could look at the next meeting, and we could answer any questions about the ordinance and determine whether you want us to bring the ordinance back in September. And again, our goal is to get the options from the school district that we don't, yeah, I hope we don't have to go there, but
I hope so.
if short of an option or options from them, and our residents are concerned about, if you show that shot of cars lined along their streets,
My only concern
you know,
is,
they want us to do something.
I understand. My only concern is August 25th is not that far off. And with the school system just starting back, school, I don't know if that's enough time for the administration to do what they need to do, have meetings and discussions.
Yeah. Well, and we can move that date, but at a couple of meetings ago, I
I
think,
understand we asked you to bring us something back.
yeah, and so, I'm not, we can adjust those dates to allow more time, but I didn't want the residents to start coming back down here saying we haven't done anything when, we're working on this issue. And they wanted something done as quickly as possible. In fact, when we had the discussion, people talked about doing something before school started. We just couldn't make that work.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why we have what we have, and we can adjust it. We can do it next school year if you want, but
If you would check with Dr. Lewis to see when a reasonable time.
yeah. Mhm. It does, yeah.
Okay. All right, Counselor
So I
Barnes.
did, Madam Mayor,
Oh.
she asked me to check with Dr. Lewis and do what now?
Wait, hold
The
on.
time frame to see how that works with it
Okay,
for
I will.
them.
I can do that, yeah.
Okay.
Counselor Barnes?
I intend to agree with the Mayor Pro Tem. When this was my district, this was a problem. I think you remember when we had that meeting, you sent David over to one of the residents' houses, and enforcement really solved the problem. I'm going to be honest with you, it did, and it was a coordination with the school. So I would like to give the school system a little bit more time to react on this issue. And I also want to commend Mr. Lackey for coming down here, because it has been an ongoing problem with the citizens there. But I think we need to really have the school system buy into the solution as well for this year.
All right, well, I think that concludes discussion. Looks like, Mr. City Manager, if you'll get with Dr. Lewis and explain the timeline that's currently being proposed, and see what their feedback is there, and explain the 8 weeks, and then the proposed enforcement of January 1. And certainly, if they have another proposal, I think you can bring that back when you come back in August and let us know that they've asked for more time or whatever their proposed solution might be. All right, great discussion. Thank you, Donna, very much. And now we'll move back into the city attorney's agenda. If you would turn on Mr. Fay's mic. And we want to first call up the minutes of June 16th, 2015. That was provided in your minutes, in your packages, and on ECAP. Is there a motion? A motion and second for approval. Tiny, did you want to speak about something? I see you lit up there.
More.
Okay. We've got a motion and second for approval. Were there any edits or corrections? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please state aye. Great, thank you. Mr. Fay.
Ms. Washington, were there 3 sets of minutes to be approved? We had some on the mayor's agenda. Okay. All right. Well, we'll move into the next items. We've got several business items for a vote, and then we got a lot of people here for a few zoning hearings. First item up is the annual leave and police pay reform ordinance. Ready for a vote?
We've got a motion and second for approval. Is there any discussion? We're going to have to take manual votes. As I said, the electronic system is down. So all those in favor, please state aye. Are there any opposed? Thank you.
Okay. That passes. Next item is the ordinance changing the street name from Gunboat Drive to Chastain Drive. It's ready for action.
We've got a motion and second for approval. Is there any discussion related to this item? Seeing none, all those in favor, please state aye. Are there any opposed? Okay. Tiny, would you take a roll call vote?
All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and opposed is 3.
All right, the item is inconclusive.
We'll have to bring back that next meeting in August. We'll bring it back, Mayor. The last meeting in August. Okay, we've got a no parking anytime on Billings Road. It's ready for adoption.
We have a motion and second for approval. Is there any discussion on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor, please state aye. Are there any opposed?
Okay, that passes. Next item is a no parking anytime on Tulakas Lane.
We have a motion and second for approval. Is there any discussion related to this item? Seeing none, all those in favor, please state aye. Are there any opposed?
All right, that passes. All right, now we've got some zoning hearings, Mayor. The first one we'll call up is 3535 Macon Road, going from neighborhood commercial to general commercial. This is Ken and Parker petition. Proposed use detached general retail, and it's recommended for approval. Is the petitioner here? All right, let's see if there's anybody opposed. Anybody in the audience opposed to this application? Any questions of council?
I don't see any at this
Okay.
time.
You don't have to make a presentation. Thank you for being here.
Oh.
Oh, okay, come on back, sir.
Yeah, if you would.
Give them your name and address and a brief description of what y'all are doing.
Ernie Smallman, 6 West 7th Street. We're just trying to bring it into compliance with the UDO. It's a 7,400 square foot building, and we have the 6,000 square foot building cap in neighborhood commercial for a single tenant. So going to general commercial will allow us to occupy the whole building with one tenant.
The building's already there.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Is that the only question? All right.
Councilor Baker, was there anything else? Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay, that is an existing building. We'll vote on that at the next meeting. Next zoning item is a grocery store application at 1140 through 1100 Floyd Road, 4909 to 4915 Buena Vista. It's going from RMF2, single family 2, to general commercial. Applicant, Mr. Howell, they present. All right. So recommended denial by Planning Advisory Commission and conditional approval by the Planning Department. So you gentlemen come on up and give me your name and address. Tell them what your proposal is.
Good morning. My name is Stephen Howell, Pulsar Development, subsidiary of the Hutton Company. Business address is 736 Cherry Street, Chattanooga, Tennessee. We've been working diligently for the past few months to put together a project at the intersection of Buena Vista and Floyd. Just to go into a few brief points about the project, it's a proposed grocery store. It's approximately 41,000 square feet. It's going to require that we rezone the property that is non-parcel assemblage from a mixture of single-family residential, multifamily, and neighborhood commercial to a collective zoning of general commercial to allow for the grocery store with a drive-through pharmacy. This is proposed elevations of the building. It's going to be a great-looking building in the area. Faux stone, a lot of great architectural features. And I'm going to open the floor up for any questions.
What was the, why don't you walk through for council the opposition at PAC and that vote, if you could just recount, and they may want to hear from staff as well.
Yes, ma'am. We ran into some opposition at PAC associated with the apartment complex at 1106 Floyd Road. When we put the property under contract, we don't have the authority to reach out to tenants directly. And when we became aware that they were unaware of the potential rezoning and purchase of property, we made arrangements to meet with every tenant, explain to them what's going on, and get everybody on the same page. Another concern that was brought up at PAC was the proximity to other residences. And if I can go back to the PowerPoint. I believe the required buffer is 30 feet off of a residential property. The red line is a proposed 100-foot buffer, which would be part of, I guess, of a conditional approval if we can have the zoning approved. That would mean that we have an undisturbed buffer of 100 feet from the adjacent residential property. That was the majority of the opposition at PAC.
Rick, did you have anything, or the council? Okay. Mr. City Attorney? Hold on.
Oh, we've got a condition in the ordinance about the 100-foot buffer, so any other points planning wants to make, we'll move on and see if anybody's here.
Are there any property owners in, yeah, I know we have some tenants. Are there any property owners in opposition that, you know?
No, ma'am. There are none of the current property owners that are a part of our assemblage that are in opposition.
I see. Okay. Yes. I see some hands.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes,
But they're not part of the,
They're not part of the assemblage that we're putting together.
I see, adjacent. Okay, great.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Mr.
Okay.
City Attorney, you wanted to call?
Yeah. Sir, y'all want to come on up in opposition? Give them your name and address, please, sir.
I'm Kathy Phillips. My husband Benny Phillips. We're at 1216 Floyd Road. We are the property that's right directly next to where they're proposing, where you see on the square. Can you see it on Floyd? We're the next residential place there that they're not buying. They're
We're
buying
the one that's going to be looking at our bedroom window at the grocery store.
At the grocery
or
store.
lights.
But, so we're opposed to having it all.
Where are you? I'm sorry.
We're on Floyd Road. We're 1216, right? The next piece of property that they're talking about putting this 100-foot buffer, we're that
And
property.
100 foot is nothing when you're talking about a grocery store that size and all those lights,
So they bought all the property right up to our property.
or buying property right up to
Right.
ours.
But the point being, I don't know that we need another grocery store in the area. There's a Winn-Dixie Walmart in the very next block. I'm told this is a proposal for a Walmart market. I'm not sure. We're also been told by many sources that when they finish the Walmart Supercenter on Baker, that they're going to close this Walmart. So it'll be sitting there vacant. So if they want to build a Walmart market, they could put it in that Walmart store they're closing or whatever. There's a Winn-Dixie there. There's a independently owned Rainbow Foods within a mile. There's a Publix within 2 miles. And then the Piggly Wiggly Group has built a brand-new shopping center that's supposed to open Labor Day with a grocery store that is at the other end of Floyd Road, less than a mile away. So, I mean, I think you're jeopardizing local people, like with Rainbow and Piggly Wiggly, when you put another store in. Piggly Wiggly just made this huge investment right there. And we don't need another market in the store. And they displaced all the apartment owners who didn't want to leave, and they told us that they came in there and offered them money to leave.
We was told they paid them $1,250 a piece.
$1,250
And told them they had
plus,
1 month to get
plus
out or
their,
else, you know.
their first month's rent and their deposit if they would move, so they wouldn't be opposing them.
And
Really?
now, we can't afford to move. We bought our house, we paid for it, we've lived there 32 years. In fact, we bought it from some of the folks that sell
They
it
sell the
out
property
now.
next to us, we bought it from them, so.
And we have added on a handicapped bathroom to that house that we
We have a daughter that's handicapped that lives with us, so we
that
can't.
still lives at home, and we cannot move. We can't afford to build a new one. So we're kind of stuck. So we certainly don't want to see this happen.
Sure.
So
It
you
should be
just
residential.
Don't really need another grocery store when you've got 3 that close and one brand new one about to open Labor Day. Why do you need to put another store?
One thing, and of course, I don't know that anybody here can judge the market conditions. We usually let the businesses judge the market conditions. But, Rick, one thing that they did say, I think we'd like to hear more about the 100-foot buffer and how that compares to what normally we do, but also the thought that there could be another grocery store in that strip. Don't usually, if there's an existing grocery store, they usually have, like I know, for instance, the Kmart over here, they have prohibitions against any other grocery store or like store going into that strip. So if there's anything that they raised as a concern that you can speak to.
Madam Mayor, members of council, typically on dealing with budget, buffer issues here, you're looking at a minimum, really, in some cases, of 20 feet. And usually that can be either a fence, or it can just be shrubbery, or it can be whatever from that standpoint. But it's nothing to the extent you're seeing with this proposal here of a 100-foot buffer in terms of protecting that property. And in terms of that, you're also looking at, there's another detention pond going in on that back side that's going to prohibit anything else from being built by that way. And I don't know that you may see something, I don't know what they got proposed there, right there on the, I guess that's the northwest corner there for anything else to be developed. But still, you've got a 100-foot buffer involved with that in terms of trying to protect the property around it. And as the mayor said, we pretty much let the market determine where they think they can put another grocery store in or a shoe store or whatever. That's really based on the developer and the company that's doing that. We look at it strictly from a land use issue and not an economic issue.
All right, any discussion, questions? Councilor Thomas.
Madam Mayor, I've been told by the city attorney that we need to amend the proposal that he has before us. It says the north.
Yeah, we need to just amend the condition to say a 100-foot buffer shall be placed at the northwest corner and run the length of the property.
It currently says northeast corner, and so we need to
east.
change.
Oh, so it's an error.
Heading
Yeah,
east
error.
to the limits of disturbance.
And by doing that, that doesn't approve any portion of the rest of the ordinance. It just makes this one correct. So I move that we amend the ordinance from
Just amend the
northeast to
condition,
northwest.
right. Say
Is that right?
It will say northwest corner and run the length of the property heading east to the
Okay.
limits of disturbance as shown on the site plan submitted with the application.
Okay, and there's a motion by Councilor Thomas and a second by the Mayor Pro Tem. Any discussion on the amendment? Councilor Ireland, is that to the amendment or to the overall?
Well, since we're amending it, I've noticed that the language does not say undisturbed natural buffer. And looking at the pictures, there's quite a dense foliage there now. So I guess two questions. One is, does the developer plan to encroach into the buffer as far as construction? And what would they plan to do to enhance the 100-foot buffer that we amend?
Yes, sir. To answer your question about construction, the only construction that will take place back there is the demolition of an existing residence in the 100-foot buffer, but it'll be planted back with foliage and trees. We're not planning on disturbing any of the
For the detention pond?
we're not planning on disturbing anything further than what we need to do to demo the house, and then we'll plant it back to keep it an undisturbed or as minimally disturbed as possible natural buffer.
What's the distance between the detention pond and the property line?
The property line
Is it greater than 100 feet?
to the north?
Yes.
No, sir. There's a line to the left of that shows a detention pond, and if it needs to come all the way across, we can adjust the detention pond through depth and elongation to make sure that that 100-foot buffer runs all the way across. Right now, it runs currently to the back of what would be the 1216 Floyd Road property line. Is that
I'm not following.
okay?
Hey, this is Jamie Flegel with Hutton, same address. The 100-foot buffer stops, if you look at that plan that's in front of you. Jeff, can you point that out for us? The 100-foot buffer stops if you have a pen maybe to give an actual point.
Madam Mayor, if we will have staff to assist them, we can actually draw, show them.
Show them how to draw on the screen there, and they can actually draw it.
The 100-foot, now we have that on there. The 100-foot buffer ends at that line that was drawn on the plan that you see in front of you. And then at the pond, it is a pond. There, you can see the trees that will be planted along the buffer there. That's what is indicated. and here are trees. And then so the 100-foot buffer runs here. It moves, then it goes north to the property away, and then becomes a 30-foot buffer on the backside of the pond. But that is a detention pond with vegetation around it, like grass detention pond.
So where's the house that you were talking about?
That was my next question.
Yeah, where's the house? Okay, so you have to.
We will demo that house.
Now,
Okay.
Where is their house? That was my
And their
question.
house.
Their house is up here.
Yes. How do we go back to
Well, the technology on lights today is not as glaring as they used to be. So I really don't. Just
the lighting that will be used in this will be like shoebox lighting. It'll be directed down. You're not going to have the lighting will, like I said, it is directional. And I'm sure that not familiar with you guys' ordinances on your light ordinances, but usually it would not be an issue to put zero shut-off fixtures at the property line, so that the light at the property line would be cast back onto the property instead of having a 360-degree light.
I appreciate you explaining that. I wanted the Phillips to know that it's not you will see there will be some light pollution, but it's not as some. The technology and lighting systems today is much better than it was a few years ago. Well, I understand your concern, but I wanted to answer the question on lighting for you. It's not as, no pun intended, it's not as glaring an issue as it has been in the past. We have taken steps to direct developers to address the lighting and use neighborhood-friendly lights instead of trying to light up the world in a parking lot.
The way we see this project.
How tall will your poles be that the lights are on?
Do you remember what the design is, 25 or 30?
How tall?
Height of the lights.
I believe they're 28 feet tall.
20?
28.
28?
Yes.
That's pretty normal. It's usually like a 24, 25-foot pole on a 3-foot base.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah.
I would, Mr. City Chairman, Madam Mayor, like to make a motion to add the word undisturbed to the buffer, so it would read
right.
undisturbed natural buffer.
A natural undisturbed 100-foot buffer.
Right. And then I think the gentleman said he was going to add plantings in.
The plantings are along. We're not going to add plantings within the buffer. We will leave it undisturbed. But we will, as indicated on the plans, that will be covered by the approved plans that will go in front of the planning staff for approval. But what you're seeing in front of you is trees in this area. But again, to clarify, the 100-foot buffer was not intended to, the undisturbed 100-foot is not intended to go the full width of the property just until it gets to the point that you see the heavy dash line that we drew in. Then it goes to a 30-foot buffer, but even within that area that's not undisturbed, there is going to be a detention. You're not going to see a building for much more than 100 feet.
What plantings could you do on around that curve or the detention pond? It looks like you show some small trees right there. Are there plantings you could add to maybe curve that around a little more?
Sure.
That wouldn't be an issue.
We can put thick shrubs and foliage through there to hide everything.
And I think if you look at the underlining, I mean, we don't have Google Earth up, but if you look at the underlining vegetation that's there on that property today, if we leave it undisturbed, it's going to be pretty thick. Of course, in the winter, we could plant an evergreens in that particular area,
Well,
so that it could.
That's what we'd prefer. But once you go in there and you start creating the area where the detention pond is going to be, you're going to take out a lot of that undisturbed area.
Right.
And that's why I was asking what you could do.
Certainly along that perimeter, if we needed to add like Leland cypresses along that particular area to create a permanent evergreen hedge, we could do something like that. And they grow very quickly.
Do you have a plan, or could you have a plan within the next 2 weeks to show us? We could amend it to the ordinance and then.
Sure.
Yes.
Before the second reading, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And I guess my last question would be, are there any lights required around the detention pond? No lighting in that area? Okay. All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Edge of asphalt would be the end of all lighting. If we can go back to the site plan, Jeff, we could show, highlight what that would be.
So that was a motion to add the word undisturbed natural.
Lighting would be ending at the edge of asphalt.
Along with the other change,
Okay.
northwest corner.
We need a
running
second to
east.
add that. Second. We have stacked motions. So we'll call the first one, which was to amend the ordinance to say northwest instead of northeast. We're going to take that one first. Any further discussion on the amendment of the directional indication? Seeing none, all those in favor of changing the ordinance to indicate northwest, please state aye. Are there any opposed? Okay, and then we have the other motion to add the words undisturbed natural buffer. And
Natural undisturbed.
Excuse me?
Natural
undisturbed. Okay.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, sir. Can you turn on Counselor Allen's?
I
Yes,
think
thank
the, just for clarification, it says a 100-foot buffer shall be placed at the northeast corner and run the length of the property heading to the west limits of the district. Should we change that word west to east?
Well, no, we're changing northwest corner running east, the length of the property to the disturbed area, so.
That's what you called originally for the
That's
motion?
what we already did.
So it's that northwest corner running east.
Will be a 100-foot buffer all the way to the detention pond area.
I'm with you on that, but
Yeah.
this says run the length of the property heading west.
No, we just changed that to east. We
But
put
we
in,
didn't- but we
we
didn't
put in
say
the
that
word
wrong.
northwest.
I didn't say it all. He called it
Okay.
first.
Well,
Yeah,
I
and
just-
then I didn't repeat
all I
it all.
heard her say was
northwest.
east
Yeah.
to northwest.
Northwest corner running east.
All right. As long as we're on the same page.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, and let's see here. Where were we, Tiny?
Councilor Allen's motion to add the word undisturbed natural buffer. Second on that.
Okay, is that correctly called, Mr. Singh?
Natural undisturbed. right.
Natural undisturbed buffer, that's what we're doing. All right, all those in favor, please state aye. Any opposed? Okay.
All right.
We've got Counselor Davis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know this is just a conceptual site plan and that you've got some space that you're saving, some green space, undisturbed natural areas, and I know that will count towards your TDUs and replacement of the trees, but I'm not sure if this is not an approved plan yet by the, I guess, our tree arborist. So I guess my question would be around the lines of how do you plan within the site of the development throughout the parking lot and all, how do you plan to replace the trees that are being taken down?
I'll let Mr. Bellier speak to that as the engineer. I'm Jeff Bellier with Wolverton and Associates. I'm at 6745 Sugarloaf Parkway, Duluth, Georgia. This plan has actually been submitted to the engineering department, and we are not approved yet, but we received some minor comments. Those have been addressed and resubmitted. We expect this plan to be approved.
Okay. Mr. Jones, I wanted to ask you, what is your reasoning behind the issue with the traffic impact?
Councilor Davis, this is one of those unique situations. That's the best way I describe it to you in dealing with traffic. We're already dealing at a very, very high level of service out there at Floyd and Buena Vista Road at this time. With this development coming on, it's certainly not going to help the existing conditions out there,